Be ready. Now, keep in mind that if you're watching this on the replay, fast forward to about maybe the 5-minute mark, which is when I'll start. So again, I'll give us some time for people to jump on board. So again, if you're watching this on the replay, jump forward 5 minutes. And today's topic again is going to be storytelling. I keep getting these questions because people see a lot of my videos online when I do the big stages. And I'm always asked the question, how do you tell stories? How do you build these stories? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through my formula for building stories. And then you're going to be able to come up with your own stories. And then again, if I give you the simple formula, which is really a simple formula, it's the execution part that's the tough part. If you think about speaking, the toughest part of speaking, or at least giving a presentation, is obviously content matters. And we'll talk about that. It'll be content, right? But it's the delivery system as well. So let me see who we got coming in. We got Yohendra Singh. Where are you from? I think I got that right. Yohendra, right? Sai T, my girl, what's happening? So glad you joined me. Excellent. Like I said, I'll wait a couple more minutes before people jump on board. When people jump on board, I'll get started. But today's topic again is storytelling, and should be fun. And if you've never seen some of my presentations on the big stage, you should check it out. Jennifer, that is fantastic, great. Yohendra is a Yogendra, one of the two. But anyway, from India, way to go. Aloha VA, so I'm assuming Hawaii right there. This guy right here, that guy right there. That is the man. Chevy is a good friend, man. Thank you for joining me, Chevy, man. Appreciate you, man. Haven't seen you in a while, though, man. We got to get together. I'll be down in Miami in about 3 weeks. Maybe I'll give you a holler. How's that? S.A. Guzman, buenos días. A ti, señor, muy buenos días. Dean Hankey. Dude, this guy. Just look him up. He's a cool dude, man. Very cool dude. Very talented dude. I need more stories in my presentations as well. Love it, man. It's amazing how they're very powerful. Zig Ziglar was the master at storytelling. You are absolutely correct, man. I pretty much studied at the knee of Zig Ziglar. So, it's funny because if you watch a lot of my movements on stage, and telling the stories, changing the vocal variety, Zig Ziglar taught me. I look at Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn. Hemingway, do you know who Jim Rohn is? Jim Rohn, this guy. Rohn. If you don't know who he is, you should look him up. I believe this Jim Rohn was actually one of Tony Robbins' mentor. But Jim Rohn, when it comes to speaking in terms of eloquence, there's no one better than he is. Zig Ziglar, storytelling. Jim Rohn, just a powerful way of presenting, and he doesn't even move. He just stays at a lectern, right? He just doesn't even move. That's what makes him even powerful. So you do know him, great. Sai T, my friend, stay in your lane, Victor. Corona, don't play this day. I'm okay. We're opening up here, man. Everything's just starting to open up, and the rates are going down, so everything's looking better and better every day. But I will take care of myself, so I appreciate you. Yes, he's one of my faves. Yeah, he is, man. They're good guys. That's like old school. Dean says, yeah, Zig's the best. Like I said, it's that Yazoo, Mississippi voice that Zig Ziglar has that makes you just want to keep listening over and over again. There's another speaker. Dean, you may know who this is. I know Chevy knows who this is. Les Brown. So Les Brown, another person that I think, has a very powerful voice. Les Brown. So if you heard of Les Brown, give me a 1. And so Les Brown is another guy. I did an event with Les Brown, we'll say 2 years ago. We had like 13, 14,000 people in the arena. And so Les is getting ready to talk. We're backstage, right? And we talked for a little bit, and he's real cool, calm, right? And then I said, you know what? When he went on stage, I then went around to where the audience was. And I said, let me hear him, And it's interesting, about 50% of the stuff I'd already heard, right? I knew about it already. I'd heard them in the past. But still, even if I'd heard half of the content, it was so compelling that you wanted to hear it again. I mean, that to me is the mark of just a great speaker / storyteller. Les Brown's power is obviously in the story, but Les Brown's true power is in that voice of his, man. The way he just pushes those low notes up, that rumbly voice that makes you go, ugh. Great speakers. By the way, if you have a great speaker, let me know. Yep, Hemingway 1, Liberty City, you know your stuff, man. A lot of people know who he is. Thank you, Chevy, man. Thank you. And let me see. Oh, this guy I'm going to give. Dude, I like you already, Ray. Yeah, still waiting for a pen. I love it, man. I love it. All right. So this is going to be a short one, okay? Because I got a meeting. I got to be honest. I got a meeting in about 35 minutes with another client I'm coaching. And so what I wanted to do, it's not over until I win. That's one of probably the speech topics, right? All right. Let me focus here. And so what I want to do is make this a short session on storytelling, because I always get the question, how do you create stories? And so what I'm going to do is give you my secret sauce for building a 45-minute speech, right? I usually aim for like 45 minutes. Now, the reason I aim for, well, let me explain it this way. The reason I aim for 45 minutes is because what happens is if I aim for 60, I'm forced to hit all my points. And so what happens is, what I do, and this will make sense in a little bit, let me just draw this out real quick. So what I do is when I'm doing a speech, I time it like this, right? So I create what I call modules. When I'm doing a story, I create modules. Now, I always have an opening, right? So let's call that the opening, right? And then I always have a strong close. Let's call that the close right here, right? So the opening and the close, that's the bookend. You got to start well, you got to finish well, right? So that's kind of the whole story structure. So the way I develop stories is I take this right here, and this is what I learned from Toastmasters. If you've been to Toastmasters, you were part of Toastmasters, hit the one. If you don't know what Toastmasters is, Toastmasters, which I think is one of the best investments you can ever make in your life and for your career, and especially in selling, is to join Toastmasters, and they're global. And Toastmasters is an organization where when you join them, you're given 10 types of speeches. As part of your first phase of getting in there, you're given 10 speeches. 10 different types. The first one is called an icebreaker, right? Where you talk about yourself and you have 5 to 7 minutes to talk about yourself. 5 to 7 minutes. And what happens after that? People judge you. And by the way, by judge you, I mean they give you feedback, positive and negative, just to make you better. So what happened for my brain is when I joined Toastmasters, I really loved the format. So all my speeches, if you study my speeches, all of them have a great opening. There's always an interesting opening. This I always change. But all of these are 5 to 7 minutes. All the way through, that's 5 to 7 minutes. 5 to 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. You get the idea, 5 to 7 minutes, right? Now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So now let's say they're all 7 minutes. Let's just kind of assume. So if you take 6 times 7, that's 42 minutes right there, right? So I'm giving you how I construct my speeches, okay? This is how I construct my speeches. So now I know that I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modules, right? Or 6 modules, right? So 6 basically stories, okay? If I hit the 42-minute mark, now by the way, they typically give me up to 60 minutes, right? Now, rule in speaking. When I give you 60 minutes, do not go beyond 60 minutes. That's like a cardinal sin. I've seen speakers go over their time and they don't care. It is the wrong thing to do. The event planner will not like it because you're stealing time from somebody else. Also, it shows a lack of discipline on your part if you're a professional speaker. So when they say 60 minutes, you nail 60 minutes. Do I always land on 60 minutes? No, but I always land shorter and they're always okay with that. So I typically land at about the 55-minute mark. There's the hint. So when I'm doing 42, what happens is I practice these stories, which I'm going to talk about in a bit here. And then what happens is between these, I let what I call my speech breathe a little bit. Or maybe as I'm telling the story, I don't rush through it. I just take my time. If I see the audience is reacting, I may expand upon it a little bit. So maybe if I expand the story because I see the audience is into it, you can tell when the audience is into it, right? And so sometimes when the audience is into it, I'll just maybe add a little more flavor, if you know what I mean. And so all of a sudden this becomes 8 minutes. Maybe this one will become 9 minutes. But you see, between 42 and 60, I got room to play with. So my brain never feels rushed. So when I'm telling a story and I know that the audience is enjoying it, sometimes what I'll do is I'll slow it down and add more, I guess what I call sensory perception to it. In other words, add more detail. So for example, one of my favorite Zig Ziglar stories is this one about the hound dog. I'll give you the short version. There's a man walking down the road, right? And he starts tells the story. There's a man walking down the road. In the distance, he sees a farmhouse, right? And if you see the audience lean forward, you can start describing the farmhouse. Now in that farmhouse, you had to see it. It's red, wood outside, kind of half, it was old. You can tell it was at least 100 years old. And I'm making this stuff up right now. And all of a sudden you can add more visual to it if you want. But the great thing about having enough time and structuring this is that you don't have to rush. But if the audience is into it, do it. Now, so let me slow down because I'm throwing a lot at you. This is how I structure a general presentation. Now, what I really want to talk about is what's in here. That's the story. Now, this has a flow all the way to the end, okay? So one of the things I figure out, one of the things up here I figure out is the narrative. So let's say that I want to talk about sales velocity, right? That how to sell more faster. That's my theme. Sales velocity. How to sell more faster, right? That's my theme. So my whole presentation is dedicated to sales velocity. How to sell more faster. So that's my whole storyline. So when I get to the end, people know it's all about sales velocity. So what I do is I come up with a creative opening, right? And we'll leave that for another time because I think openings deserve their own, live stream. Let's talk about the story, which is what I want to talk about. So let's talk about that story. Now, all your stories have to connect. If you remember all the boxes, they all have to connect. You have to bridge them together. Again, we'll talk bridging at another time. Right now, I just want to zoom in on the actual story. So here's one story. Again, it can be 5 to 7 minutes long. Now, there's several ways to construct a story. Let me go through some of my connections. Sometimes there's a fascinating fact or piece of data that you want to introduce. For example, did you know that 85% of millennials spend most of their time, over 85% of their time, on their actual mobile devices? Okay? Let's say I wanted to use that piece of data. Now, if I insert that piece of data, it has to be provocative enough, insightful enough, when somebody goes, really? When you get to really, that's when you know you got something, okay? So I'm just making this up. So now, I just dropped that fact. And that only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to drop that fact. And again, you can start out something like this if you want to kind of give it more than a minute. I said, one of the questions we have to ask ourselves as salespeople is, who are we selling to? Well, the majority of people, if you look at the market today, most people think it's baby boomers, but it's really not. 50% of salespeople today are baby boomers, born before 1963. But 50% of the sales force are now millennials and Gen Xers born after that. So we just have a split. In fact, did you know that this market here, these millennials and Gen Xers, spend 85% of them spend 85% of their time on their phone. What does that mean to us in terms of how we sell more effectively? You see how I set that up? So I can set that up just like that. And then now they're like, okay, go on. Mentally, that's what they're saying. Okay, it's an interesting fact. Never knew about the 50-50, and this 85 thing is pretty interesting, right? So now I grabbed them with a piece of data and a piece of insight. And I define insight as, and you guys have seen me define insight. Insight is information, you write this down, beyond the obvious. This is a great definition. Insight is information beyond the obvious. If you want to be a great speaker, if you want to be a great storyteller, a great presenter, a great communicator, learn how to find insight, information beyond the obvious. Tell clients something they haven't thought about. Shift their perspective, make them see things differently. Present a piece of data they've never seen. Maybe show a fact, maybe do a demo, something they go, "Ooh, I've never seen that. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that." That's insight. So this piece right here could just be called a piece of insight, right? Now, next thing is you've laid down a piece of insight. Where do you go from there, right? So now I have two choices here. I can give an example, right? Keep layering it on, or I can tell a story and then tie that story into selling. So then what I would do is, like I said, again, we find out that millennials are on their mobiles most of the time. And then I can tell, and then you can just transition and say something like this. Now I'm going to transition to a story. Okay, now I'm going to transition to a story. He says, I know this is true. I'm at the mall the other day. I decided to step back. Here's my story part. I'm making this part up. And I remember looking around and I see all these people and I said, how many millennials are actually on their cell phone? So I stood there for about 20 minutes and I just started counting. And in fact, that number, 85% of millennials, young people are on their phones, is totally wrong. I say it's 100%. And you know what? You could tell a story, and you could tell about the mall. You really set up the story. And then, but here's what I noticed. And then when you move from a story, now you got to tie it into your main theme. Now, what's the main theme? Sales velocity, how to sell more faster, right? So you can tell a story. So I went up to one of these millennials and I said, how many business applications do you have on your phone? And the answer was 0. So I went up to another millennial. I'm making this up, by the way. And I asked him, how many business apps do you have on your phone? 0. And the more people I asked, the more I kept finding out nobody has business apps, which means that although they're not, they're looking at their phones, they don't have business tools. So what are they looking at? Videos, right? And then here's why I make a transition and how it applies to you. Now I got to give the audience, this is what it all means to you. So now I'll just say, I got to get audience centric here. By audience centric, I mean, I got to talk to the audience now. Now I got to give it to them. Here's what it means to you. If you talk to a millennial today, whatever, or a Gen Xer, he says they're mostly on what? It's either YouTube, Instagram, right? So we got these 4 platforms. Let's say Instagram, let's say Twitter, and again, I'm just making this up, and then say TikTok, whatever it may be, and whatever other platform. These are 4 platforms. My question to you is, how much content from a business standpoint are you promoting on either of these platforms? Is it 5, 10, 20, 30? Is it 0, 0, 0, 0? Because if we all understand that when you're going to go fish, you go where the fish are at. And if the fish are right here on these social media platforms, we have to figure out what messages we want to drive traffic to our website and content. So that's one way of constructing a story. I did that one quick, but you get the idea. Fact, open it up. But notice that the fact also ties into what? How it's going to help them. Tell a story. Again, this is here. And then the last part is, how does it impact the audience? This is what it means to the audience. So that's one way of doing it. Here's another way of doing it. And this they kind of teach you in Toastmasters. And this is the most simplest formula you're going to find. If you want a simple formula, in fact, it's this. Point, make a point, tell a story. Point, story. And your whole speech could be make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. Or tell a story first and then make the point. So in other words, I could start out with the story here, talk about audience-centric, and then to really convince them, I could end with the data piece. This stands by itself as a 5 to 7 minute module. So as you're building your speeches, as you're building your storyline, remember, let me go back this way, because I want to show you this graph again. When you're building your story, what you want to do is create 5 to 7 minute modules, another 5 to 7 minute module, all the way through. Then the job is to what? Bridge these together and you will form a keynote. And that is probably one of the easiest ways I can explain how I build my keynotes. So where do I get my ideas from? Again, it depends. Sometimes when I'm reading something, I come across a piece of insight and I go, that's interesting. So I put it down on an index card. Yes, I still go old school on that. I still write them down on index cards because maybe later on I can tie it to a story that I just haven't thought of. But sometimes I have an experience. Like the story could be something that personally happened to you. Like one of my favorite stories, my recent stories, is when I went to buy a drone. I went to buy a drone. I was ready to buy the drone. And when I get there, I'd already done my research online. And I tell the story how I get there. And I'm down to 3 drones that I want to get at Best Buy. I'm looking at 3. I'm going to make a decision. I'm ready to spend some money, right? So I start giving a drop. I'm ready to spend some money. So I go up to display. And all of a sudden, this big guy comes over. He's like 6'7", 6'8". Big giant comes over. He says, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm thinking of buying a drone, but let me just kind of look at these 2 or 3, and then if I need you, I'll call you. He says, all right, I'll be right over there. Call me. If you need me, I'm here to help. I said, great. Giant walks away. So then from the 3, I get it down to 2. I get it down to 2, and I'm like super excited because one of these is going home with me, right? And so I call the giant over. Hey, yo, dude, I'm ready. And then he comes over, and I said, no, look, I've narrowed it down to these 2. You know, can you tell me the difference of why one would be better than the other? Right? Now remember, I'm ready to spend. I got $1,200 budgeted. I'm ready to spend. I'm lock and loaded. I'm down to 2 options here. Giant, tell me which one I should choose. Just tell me which one. That's the one I'm taking home. And he immediately looks over and he starts reading, you know those little placards with the information in front of him? He starts reading what's in front of them. And I go, yeah, I read that. I was like, yeah, I read that. I said, but beyond that, why would you choose one over the other? And he's like, well, yeah, they're both good. And at that point, I knew he didn't know. So I asked him, I said, by the way, do you have a drone? He said, no. I said, did they train you on the drones? He goes, no, not really. They didn't train us on the drones. And at that moment, it was very uncomfortable. And I remember walking out of the store, not buying a drone, and I still had my money in my pocket. What happened? See, I could tell that story, right? So now I just told you a story. Now, what does it mean to the audience? Here's what it means to the audience. So back into the presentation. Now I would say something like this. He said, now let's analyze why I didn't buy. He says, because the salesperson wasn't trained, didn't know his product, wasn't a domain expert. And because he was not a domain expert, I still had some anxiety, some uncertainty of what I should buy. So I made no decision. Because when the mind is confused, it's not going to make a decision. So that was a missed sale by Best Buy. If they had only trained their salespeople, I would have bought. My question to you, audience, is how many salespeople do you have on your team who are not trained and are not selling more faster? You see how I tied that together? So I threw a story in and then tied it back to how it applies to the actual audience. Let's say it was an audience of managers or vice presidents. I'm asking them, if you're not training your salespeople, you're losing money. Get the idea? That's kind of how I do it. And so that's how I would build one story, 5 to 7 minute modules, and I would repeat this process. So where should you start? Where should you begin with this if you want to give a great, speech? Come up with at least 6 or 7 different modules, right? Just like I showed here, 6 or 7, depending on your style of speaking, right? 6 or 7 different modules. And the way I would do it is, when a story hits you, usually the gold is in a story, something you experience. Too often I see speakers copying other people's stories. You don't want to use other people's stories. If you have to, as a case study or something like that, yeah, go ahead and do it. But if I hear the Kentucky Fried Chicken story again, the Colonel Sanders story, I'm going to kill myself. If I hear the Alexander Graham Bell story again, I'm going to kill myself. If I hear the Edison story, electricity, tried 10,000 ways, but figured out one way of doing it, you know what I mean? If I hear that again, I'm going to kill myself. Because when you use stories that everybody else uses, if I hear the Oprah Winfrey story one more time, overcoming adversity, I'm going to kill myself. If I hear the Michael Jordan story from the stage one more time, I'm going to kill myself, right? Because these are not stories that are unique. Everybody's heard them. So find your stories, because, man, I know you got stories. Up there, you got some great stories. And if you could just take that story and tie it to a life lesson, right? Or take that story, tie it to a business lesson, tie it to a sales lesson like I just did. Those are the things people want to hear because they've never heard your perspective, and that's what makes you unique. When you start telling your stories in the context of a business lesson, that's when people want to listen to you. But as soon as you start saying things that 100 other speakers, 1,000 other speakers have said, then people stop listening. Too many people, for example, copy, Tony Robbins, say I, right? That whole thing. Or they copy Gary Vaynerchuk and they start swearing, right? And, they copy all these other speakers and they lose themselves because you got to figure out what your style is. I love Jim Rohn. Definitely love Zig Ziglar. I love Og Mandino. Most people have never heard of Og Mandino. When I looked at those three, that to me was like a GPS triangulation of kind of how I wanted to speak. I love the storytelling. I love the way Jim Rohn sets up a story, knocks it down. He'll set up a story, give you a life lesson that makes you go, I didn't look at it that way. So I love the way he does that. Zig Ziglar has a way of moving on stage. Og Mandino has a way of telling a story. And then what I did is I took those three guys that I really loved, and then I added the Victor special sauce, which is just me, right? And that's what people want. And the more you can use your personal stories, the better. So I'm going to end there because I really got to get going. We spent about maybe 20, 25 minutes here. Any questions? I'll handle a few, and then we'll move on. Let me see what we got here. And like I said, now keep it with regard to storytelling. So let me see. In the current COVID situation, what would be a good way to approach customers in B2B? Option 1, WebEx presentation. Option 2, cold call to a whole database and seek opportunities. Your views, please. It's too big, Sanget. Again, you're always killing me with the big questions. The thing is, look, this is part of the storytelling piece. I'll tie this into storytelling. When we started in this pandemic, when things really started going bad, let's say in March, right? You said that was the time to begin reaching out to your customers to make sure they were okay. So I would have planned out ahead of time. That's, look, in the first 2 weeks, I'm going to reach out to all my customers, my top 100, let's say, right? And I'm just going to call them just to see how they're doing and just not even try to sell them something. And then I might touch base just another 2-3 weeks later just to see if anything's changed. And I'm trying to get a sense of what's changed, but I'm still not trying to sell anything. And maybe by the time I call them the third time, I said, look, I've been thinking about your problem and your situation you're in. I figured out a way that we can help you. And so I would have been doing that. That's the nurturing that people want. If you're just blasting out to everybody, it doesn't matter. I can't tell you how many emails I get on my computer here. That it's just people, you can just tell, they try to make it personal. They try to personalize the email by just putting my name on top. But when I read the body of the context, I can tell it's a canned email. They sent it to everybody. Immediately, credibility is lost. So my question to you would be, it isn't so much about how you should do it. It's more about who you should do it to. In other words, who you're contacting. If these are new clients, it's going to be tough in this time right now as we're transitioning back out of it, to really get people to interested in your product. But what if you just start connecting with people without the intent of selling and just connecting? I would start there, man. That would be my thing. Storytelling formula. Where to begin? 6 to 7 different modules. Find your story and tie it into the module. That's it, Dean. It's not that hard, man. It's not that hard. And so let me see what else I got here. Dean, I love your suggestions here, man. Let me see. What is this one right here? Insight, information beyond the obvious. Deepak, if you got that, man, I'm telling you, people respond to that. Let me see. Got to get on the phone and makes the bake until the next lesson. A salesman is always evolving. Yeah, I mean, there isn't, it's funny because, so many years ago, I heard cold calling is dead. Rise of social media, right? Cold calling is dead. Rise of social media. It's a dumb way of looking at it. In life, there are no absolutes. There are no ones and zeros. There are no black and whites, right? It's really about using a mix. So, whether it's inbound or outbound, I always hear that argument, well, should I be doing inbound, figuring out how to market to attract buyers, or should I be doing outbound? And the answer is both, whichever gives you business. Because you may find that inbound in one market scenario might work, but in another one it doesn't. So if you can find a blend of outbound and inbound, do it. A lot of people just want to do inbound because they're afraid to get on the phone. And again, the whole fear of cold calling is, it makes no sense. If you know who you're talking to, who you need to talk to, it should be easy. But I'm going to do another event on just, cold calling. This is the alarm I had set up for my event. But anyway, so keep that in mind. It's neither inbound or outbound. And let me see. I'll start winding down here. What do you got here, Dan? You got something here. Relationship. Serve your way to success. Who can I help? How can I help? And that's it. I think right now, if you just focus on that, people will give you business. I've done a lot of free webinars for companies. The most powerful suggestion I got during this pandemic, that I thought was a great tip, was he says, contact your customers and ask them how they can help their customers, how you can help their customers. I thought that was interesting. So if this is you, this is your client, right? Your client, sorry. That's your client, that's you. Contact your client and ask them how you can help their clients, right? And you're not charging them. So I have people actually hire me, not to help their clients, but to help their clients' clients, if that makes sense. Now think about it. It's almost like a way of saying, people are struggling, so how can we help them right now? During these last 2 months, and hopefully it'll be 2 months and we can just start ending this stuff. And there's never an end, right? But you know what I mean. But what happens is, as we start to get back to this normal, those 2 months I think were gold, because people were in their offices, people were in this case their homes. You could have contacted them. Now was the time. That 2 months was the time to position yourself as the helper. You know what I mean? Somebody who just was there to help. Because as we come out of this, the economy gets going again, and I believe it's going to do this, just take off. What's happened is people are going to remember who was there when they needed help. That's why I did a lot of free webinars. And I believe in karma, man. It's going to come back to me. I know it is, because I helped a lot of companies out. Because simply, I just said, I'm at home, I got time, let me hook you guys up. And by the way, I'm doing these live streams. During the last month, I've been doing these live streams. And it's coming back around again. People are saying, Victor, we'd like to bring you in. Victor, we'd like to do something with you. Why? You just put out the positive karma, it'll come back. If what you put out is quality, it's value to somebody, it always comes back. So anyway, I don't know if I answered that question, but there it is, man. So anyway, I'm signing off. What do you got here, Dean? One more time. B2B, really? P2P. At the end of the day, it's people to people, right? It's all a subsection of business. And so if you start understanding people, I would add to this, keep in mind that people want a relationship, but first they want to know that you can help them. This is where I think things have flipped a little bit that we have to be careful with. If you think about this, I'll close on this because I think this is one of the big misperceptions out there. We often talk about, you got to have a great relationship with people, and that's how you get more business. To some extent, that's true. But what companies want from you now, what clients want from you now, is to help them with their business issue. And if you can help them with their business issue first, then the relationship with the customer will be a result of how you help them. In other words, if I'm trying to sell somebody, I'm not trying to be their friend right away. I'm trying to help them right away. Say, look, I got this product, I got the solution, I got the service that I can help you with. Let me walk you through the process. And I'll put my stamp of guarantee that this is going to help you increase your revenue, reduce your costs, or expand your market share. And if I'm successful in doing that, do you think that client wants to have a relationship with me? Of course. But if you're going in there assuming that everybody wants to have a relationship, I think you're off the path right now. So right now, the more value, the more hardcore, tangible value you can provide your customer as part of your story, the more effective you'll be in connecting with people. So on that note, I am out of here. Thank you for joining me. Take care, guys.